And thank you so much for joining us for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. I'm From Graham. Ahead today, the Supreme Court taking up arguments on the Texas abortion law, which bans almost all abortions in the state. At issue is whether it can be challenged in the federal court system. The Virginia governor's race down to the wire with the Republicans surging in the polls, but it may all come down to exactly who turns out to vote. Plus, an historic discovery uncovering the nation's oldest black churches. It's a story of faith and bringing people together.
Everything has lined up perfectly. The nation is struggling right now with a conversation on race. We're all struggling with a conversation on faith. So we now know that this is the time.
We'll have a look at the history of this remarkable congregation over the centuries. And the hit series The Chosen heads to the big screen this Christmas with the story of the birth of Jesus.
That Jesus Christ is
People must know.
born.
Ticket sales are already setting records. All those stories and more are ahead.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We begin at the Supreme Court, which is taking up challenges to that Texas law that has basically stopped abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy. The justices are hearing arguments in 2 cases today over whether abortion providers or the Justice Department can bring federal court challenges to the law, which allows private citizens to sue anyone who carries out or aids in an abortion. Supporters of the law say that unusual enforcement method protects the law from review by the federal court system. Texas State Representative Reggie Smith said both cases basically come down to the same issue, whether or not the law will be allowed to stand.
How long it will take for the Supreme Court to issue a ruling, I have no idea. But my understanding is, from watching the court through the years, that any time after tomorrow, they could issue some type of ruling.
The Texas law went into effect in September. It makes exceptions for medical emergencies, but not rape or incest. Another migrant caravan is heading toward the southern border. The caravan set out last week with about 2,000 migrants, growing to around 4,000. It's made up of people primarily from Central American countries. The latest group heads to the U.S. as the Biden administration is considering offering immigrant families that were separated during the Trump administration about $450,000 a person in compensation. That is according to the Wall Street Journal. The paper says the total payout could be more than $1 billion. Republicans criticize the idea, saying it will make the worst border crisis in history even worse. Now we want to turn to the widely watched race for governor here in Virginia. Today is the final day of campaigning before the election tomorrow. Polls have shown Republican Glenn Youngkin with momentum, but polls have been wrong in Virginia races before, and turnout is likely to be a key factor. The race could also be a key indicator how next year's congressional elections will go. Alder Hurd is on the story.
The Virginia governor's race has turned into a referendum on Joe Biden as well as former President Donald Trump, and is being watched by experts as a very reliable indicator about how Americans are feeling about the state of the nation.
Are you guys ready to win or what?
The race pits political newcomer and Republican businessman Glenn Youngkin against former governor Democrat Terry McAuliffe.
Right now, we have a big lead in the early vote.
Both candidates are crisscrossing the Commonwealth in a final sprint toward tomorrow's election. McAuliffe says he's running on education.
I got big, bold plans. I'm leading on education. That's the reason why I'm running.
But if you watch McAuliffe's ads, he appears to be running against Donald Trump.
What kind of governor would Glenn Youngkin be?
President Trump represents so much of why I'm running.
And like Donald Trump, Glenn Youngkin refuses to take coronavirus seriously.
Then over the weekend, McAuliffe changed his tune and said the election is not about Trump. Youngkin has taken aim at the teaching of critical race theory in Virginia public schools and the issue of parents' rights in education.
We will teach all history, but what we will not do, we will not teach our children to view everything through a lens of race and divide them into baskets and then make them compete against one another and steal dreams.
At a Youngkin campaign stop Friday in Charlottesville, a small group of demonstrators dressed as Unite the Right extremists with tiki torches posed as Youngkin supporters. The McAuliffe campaign seized on the incident until it was learned it was a hoax by the anti-Trump Lincoln Project. Recent polls show McAuliffe up by 1, but one outlier poll by Fox News shows Youngkin up by 8. CBN News chief political analyst David Brody says that in Virginia, where a Republican hasn't won a statewide office since 2009, the race should not be this close.
The truth of the matter is, as relates to Terry McAuliffe, he's a well-known guy. Everybody knows him in Virginia, the former governor. Joe Biden's the president. You would think that Virginia is blue, and it's been becoming more and more blue as the years have gone on, and he's in a tight race. That is not good news for McAuliffe.
Virginia has a long history of voting against the party in the White House when choosing its governor. And with Joe Biden's low approval numbers, there are signs rank-and-file Democrats aren't as energized to vote.
I do think that there is an enthusiasm gap with the Democrats. I think a lot of people are just kind of frazzled and burnt out with everything that's going on.
Democrats are disillusioned and therefore are less enthusiastic about voting. That is really entirely the reason why this is tied. Republican enthusiasm is through the roof. Democratic enthusiasm is much lower than that.
No matter who wins, Virginians will elect their first lieutenant governor that is a woman and a woman of color, either Democrat Hala Ayala or Republican Winsome Sears. In the only other gubernatorial race Tuesday, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy leads in his re-election bid against Republican challenger Jack Ciattarelli. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Now, as Dale mentioned, President Biden's poll numbers are an important factor in this race, and a new NBC News poll shows the president at a new low, with only a 42% approval rating, while 54% disapprove of the job he is doing. And a new ABC News poll shows that Democrats are not selling the president's huge social spending and climate change plan and infrastructure bill to the public. ABC says most people don't know what's in the plan, or they're skeptical they would likely help themselves or the economy if it is signed into law. The global death toll from COVID-19 has now topped 5 million, less than 2 years into the pandemic. Together, the U.S., European Union, Britain, and Brazil account for 1/8 of the world's population, but nearly half of all reported COVID deaths. America has lost more than 740,000 people, and COVID has made its way back to the White House. Press Secretary Jen Psaki said Sunday she's contracted the disease and is experiencing mild symptoms. She did not accompany President Biden on his current European trip. Coming up, a professor at a university here in Virginia says she is going on the offense to defend her right to free speech and challenge cancel culture. We'll hear the story when we come back. Stay with us. A professor at a Virginia university is standing up for her free speech after a tweet she made that's riled up the LGBTQ plus groups on her campus. Sophia Nelson is a scholar in residence at Christopher Newport University, and she's speaking out after students maligned her reputation over a tweet criticizing the sexualization of the Superman comic books. And she pointed out she was talking about any kind of sexualization, not just homosexuality.
When people lead in offense, and you lead with anger, and you lead with hurt feelings, you're never going to have the outcome that you want. You're going to do damage to other human beings. You're going to hurt careers. You're going to ruin reputations because you got mad and because you got hurt. If you wonder why our country is divided as it is, and why this Virginia election is as close as it is, and why we are in the place that we are in, this right here is a perfect example of why. Somebody saw me, that they caused some hurt and pain. I immediately went about to fix it, and I immediately wanted to address it, and I immediately was looking forward with excitement to sitting with you on the great lawn and fellowshipping and talking. I planned to buy everybody a cup of coffee or whatever they wanted on me. And we just sit there and we talk all day. Whatever you needed, I wanted to give it to you. Instead, I have an angry mob after me, and that's what has happened. It is a mob. And once the mob gets whipped up, and once the mob needs its pound of flesh, it doesn't know how to stop itself. And that's the real tragedy of this. You know, I know something about gender and equity and race. I do. I may not have an Ivy League degree, and I may not be a PhD like Dr. Stern and others like her who think that in their elitism and their wokeism, that they're the only ones who can tell the rest of us how to live, how to think, what to say, what not to say, and that they're the ones that should run everything. I don't want to know people like that. I don't want to know people that like to write open proclamations and letters, blasting their colleagues, condemning them, attacking their faith. I don't want to know people like that. I don't. And I'm just being real with you because this generation prides itself, my students, on being real. You like to keep it real. So I will. Just as you say I'm accountable for my words and actions, and I am, so are you.
And Trey Goins-Phillips with FaithWire.com joins us now. He's been following this story. So, Trey, Professor Nelson says she never meant to offend any students or faculty and wanted to use this to promote better understanding of differing opinions, but there's been no effort by the school or students toward this, correct?
Well, the university's president, the outgoing president, Paul Tribble, he's been there for decades. When all of this first started, he made an attempt to reach out and say, okay, we'll hold a forum on campus, like Sophia Nelson mentioned in that clip, and we can all discuss it. But due to some circumstances, she had a surgery last week, and then it ended up being delayed. And so she reached out again, said, well, we can do something over Zoom. I can call into a student government forum, whatever. And all of those suggestions were rebuffed. And in the meantime, one of the professors she mentioned, Michelle Stern, she's in the comms department. She rallied together other faculty members and they issued a statement against Sophia Nelson. And now she says, even though she's tentatively scheduled to appear at the university on November 9, she said, I have no interest in going there anymore because she feels so attacked by the very university that wants her to be there. Her contract just started in October at the university.
Now, Nelson says the faculty and universities have let the students down in this culture. What do you mean by that?
I think she means if you watch the full video of her speech, which is on faithwire.com, she talks about cancel culture, as she mentioned briefly in that clip, and about how this kind of mob mentality of going after someone with whom you disagree, she said all it does is stifle conversation, and it limits, one, the opportunity for dialogue, but two, it limits the opportunity for people to grow. Nelson's opinion could have changed. Students' opinions could have changed had they had discussion, but because discussion is stifled as soon as someone is disagreed with, because people just go into attack mode, they're losing that opportunity for growth.
Do you think Nelson going on the offense, as she says, will make a difference for her or others in the future?
Look, I think she's right about these kind of issues leading the Virginia gubernatorial race to be so close. I think that's why we're seeing so much of it, whether it's with Loudoun County or critical race theory across the country, whatever it is, or cancel culture of people who have differing opinions, like Sophia. I think that her speaking up certainly will make a difference because it's drawing more eyes to the issue. So I don't know how it's going to turn out with her case in particular, but I think more and more parents of kids in public schools, more and more students in college settings are feeling frustrated by this stifling, like I mentioned, of conversation.
So, Trey, where do things stand now for Nelson, and what's going to happen next for her?
So she issued an open letter last week ahead of the speech she gave, where she said that she plans to honor her contract with CNU, which is a year ago into fall of 2022. She said she's leaving the ball in their court. CNU has yet to say anything about whether she'll stay on faculty or if she won't. But as of right now, she still is a faculty member, but the university has not responded to her latest comments.
All right, you'll continue following this for us, and we'll continue to watch. Trey Goins-Phillips with faithwire.com. Thank you so much for bringing us this story. Want to remind you at home. Thank you. Want to remind you at home you can catch Faithwire this evening at 8:30 Eastern. You can find it on the CBN News Channel, or you can see it on the CBN News app. Still ahead, an important discovery uncovering one of the nation's first black churches in Williamsburg, Virginia, and how both black and whites are coming together to tell the remarkable story behind this historic church and its congregation. We're going to have this story for you. It's all coming up right after this here on CBN Newswatch. Stay with us. Archeologists have uncovered the foundation of one of the country's oldest black churches from colonial times. The congregation of First Baptist Church of Williamsburg, Virginia, began meeting secretly outdoors in 1776. But much of its history was lost when its building was covered over by a parking lot. Now, black and whites are coming together to tell the whole entire story. Wendy Griffith brings us this report.
After a year of digging, archaeologist Jack Gary says they found what they were looking for.
We've uncovered two foundations of two different buildings, one of them being what we believe is to be the first permanent building that the congregation began to worship in the early 1800s. And then the second foundation is for their second church, which replaced the first church, which actually was demolished by a tornado. We've also discovered 28 burials that we believe are members of the historic congregation.
First Baptist dates back to 1776, when free and enslaved blacks would meet in secret outdoor gatherings, despite laws that forbade it. Years later, a white colonist named Jesse Cole was so moved by their worship, he offered them his carriage house, and that became their first church building. The second church, which was much bigger, was built in 1856 and stood until 1956 when Colonial Williamsburg bought the property, paid for a new church building a few blocks away, and turned the old church into a parking lot.
It was hurtful. Colonial Williamsburg knew this. They accepted it and they acknowledged it. And right now, we've moved from the hurt over to the healing. And it's a pretty powerful feeling now for those descendants that are still here. They actually get to see it all being uncovered.
Imagine the prayers that were prayed, the songs that were sung, and the sermons that were preached right here on the site of one of the oldest black congregations in America. Now, the First Baptist Church hopes that uncovering the past will bring the healing that America needs now.
I want people to feel that healing can happen, that togetherness, it can happen. All of the things that we thought could not happen, all we have to do is come together and recognize each other's humanity and that we all serve the same God.
Reverend Dr. Reginald Davis is pastor of First Baptist in Williamsburg, which has thrived since 1776, despite slavery, racism, and its history almost being covered up.
We're going to have to make sure that we tell the whole story, not half of the story.
Harshaw says first and foremost, this is a story of faith.
Look at God. He is really in the midst of all of this because everything has lined up perfectly. The nation is struggling right now with a conversation on race. We're all struggling with a conversation on faith. So we now know that this is the time. There is no other time. So I just think that it's one of the things that will bring the country together.
Some of the exciting findings so far, a 1-cent coin dated 1817 and some copper pins that were common on women's clothing. They plan to keep digging for another year. Then they hope to reconstruct the original church by 2026, just in time for the celebration of America's independence in 1776. Wendy Griffith, CBN News, Williamsburg.
Up next, the hit series The Chosen goes to the big screen this Christmas with the story of the birth of Jesus Christ, and it is already breaking records. Stay tuned for that when we come back. Stay with us. The world's #1 crowdfunding series, The Chosen, began sales for its Christmas movie on the birth of Jesus. Christmas with The Chosen, The Messengers, broke Fathom Events' record with $1.5 million in sales in the first 12 hours. That is according to Fathom Events executive Ray Nutt. It is the first of the series franchise to go to the big screen. Series creator Dallas Jenkins says it tells the story of Mary and Joseph and the birth of Jesus. It will open in more than 1,500 theaters across the nation on December 1st. Details on tickets and locations can be found at fathomevents.com. Jenkins says it will give Chosen fans a chance to gather and celebrate Jesus. He says it also includes some great music by Christian artists like Phil Wickham for King and Country and Maverick City Music. Time now for your Monday motivation. I want to leave you with this thought. Hold fast to what you believe. Don't be moved by what you see or even what you feel. The ultimate truth is in what God promises, and He promises you a hope and a future. He also promises all things work together for your good. So get this, if it is not good, God is not done. With that, I encourage you to make today a marvelous Monday and be sure to have yourself a wonderful week. Do that on purpose and in purpose. Well, that is going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. Thank you so much for watching. I want to remind you, you can always find more of our programs on the CBN News Channel at any time. You can also find them online at cbnnews.com. Of course, we would love to know what you think about any of the stories you've seen here today. You can do that by emailing us. The address is right there at the bottom of your screen. It's newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We would love to hear from you. Hope you'll join us again right here, same time tomorrow. We truly appreciate your company. Thanks for watching, everybody. Goodbye, and God bless.